The first thing Wilken Norrell noticed when he stepped into the Xenocultural Exchange Lab was that it still smelled faintly like ozone and lemon cleaner. He didn't know whether that was from the atmospheric filtration system or the cadre and intern who compulsively wiped down every surface with a citrus-scented wipe. Still, it was familiar, and familiar was nice when your job involved explaining humanity to a dozen species who didn't even blink the same way. Wilken was 34, former paramedic, current liaison between Earth and the Interstellar Academic Union's first ever cross-species internship program. The humans called the initiative the glass house, a poor metaphor that persisted despite no one liking it. The aliens just called it Study Cluster 17. He adjusted the strap on his duffel and entered the central observation room. 3 alien students were already waiting, their postures varied, but all betrayed the same thing: confusion. One of them, a tall, stalk-limbed being with folds of lavender skin and a single black eye, approached. He was called Fennel. Not professor, not doctor. Just Fennel. "You were late, Wilken Norrell," Fennel said. "Yeah, sorry. There was a delay with the shuttle from Tycho Base. Dust storm." Wilken dropped his bag and checked the room's holo display. "Where's the rest of the group?" "They are attempting to digest protein bars," Fennel replied. "Unsuccessfully." Wilken stifled a laugh. The interns were still adjusting to Earth food. "I told them to stick to the hydro nutrition packs until their digestive profiles were cleared. They did not listen." "Of course they didn't," Wilken muttered. He stepped toward the presentation console. "All right, let's get started. Today we're covering basic first response trauma care. Controlled bleeding, wound stabilization, infection prevention. You'll watch me demonstrate, then we'll review emergency protocols from the human side of things." From the corner of the room, another intern, a short, mineral-skinned being named Alrox, raised a hand. "Why does your species experience so much accidental trauma? Our habitats are smoother." Wilken tapped the screen, bringing up a photo of a skateboard. "Because we do things like this. For fun." He didn't bother explaining what a half-pipe was. That was a lesson for another day. Hours passed in instruction. The students were attentive, more so than Wilken expected. They recorded everything with their ocular nodes, asked questions about muscle density, blood clotting, and the human tendency to run toward danger. Some of the questions were earnest. Others bordered on disbelief. "Your dermal layer is so fragile," Fennel observed, trailing one long digit along the edge of a synthetic bandage. "And yet you do not encase yourselves in protective plating. Too heavy. We go for mobility over armor. Besides, we've got medical systems and fast response teams." "But sometimes you must be alone," Alrox said. Wilken nodded. "Yeah, sometimes you are." It was evening by the time Wilken left the lab. His apartment was 3 levels above the training center, a modest place with recycled air and a window that faced Saturn's rings. He collapsed onto his cot, boots still on. He didn't notice the small gash on his forearm until he rolled over and felt the fabric stick. He sat up, peeling away the sleeve. The cut was deeper than he thought, maybe 6 inches long, jagged from elbow to wrist. There was already dried blood along the edge. He'd probably scraped it on the equipment locker when unloading the simulation dummies, but hadn't felt it until now. Wilken sighed. He went to the sink, rinsed the wound with disinfectant, then reached into the med kit under the counter. Gauze, sterile pads, coagulant spray. He worked quickly, methodically. The pain was dull, more of a sting than a throb, but as he wrapped the bandage around his arm, he felt the fatigue settle into his bones. Just as he finished, the door chimed. He opened it to find Fennel and Alrox standing there. "We have reviewed the day's materials," Fennel said, "but we require clarification on the field dressing methodology." Wilken blinked. "Now? We are nocturnal. This is the optimal window for our cognitive retention." Wilken sighed and stepped aside. "Fine. Come in." They entered, eyes scanning every surface of the room with a curiosity that bordered on intrusive. Wilken sat on the edge of the bed, trying not to shift his arm too much. Alrox's gaze fell on the bandage. "You are injured." Wilken followed his eyes down. He'd wrapped it tight, but a faint red stain had begun to bloom through the cloth. Yeah, he muttered. Scraped it earlier. Nothing serious. Fennel leaned in. That is not superficial. Why did you not report to the facility med center? I've had worse, Wilken said. Cleaned it, dressed it, I'll keep it elevated for a bit. It's no big deal. Alrox looked genuinely disturbed. You are actively bleeding, and you say this is nothing. I didn't say nothing. I said not serious. It's just a cut. I've had broken ribs, dislocated shoulders, a punctured lung once. This is manageable. Fennel's eye narrowed. You are not attempting to impress us, are you? Wilken gave a tired chuckle. Nope. If I wanted to impress you, I'd show you what we do during hurricane season. He stood to get a fresh bandage, but his vision blurred slightly. He sat back down. Alrox moved closer. You are pale. Yeah, well, I've been pale my whole life. You are losing blood. Wilken nodded. That does tend to happen with cuts. Fennel turned to Alrox. We must report this. I'm fine, Wilken said, but the edge in his voice was gone. There was only weariness. Fennel didn't wait for further protest. He activated the emergency beacon on the wall. Within minutes, a medical drone arrived, scanning Wilken's vitals and administering a mild anesthetic. The technician who followed, an older woman with a badge reading Dr. Marnie's, frowned as she examined the wound. This needed stitches, she said. Why didn't you come in? I didn't think it was that deep. She gave him a look. Next time, let me decide what qualifies as deep. Wilken didn't argue. The stitching took 20 minutes. He sat still, arm extended, while the students watched in silence. When it was done, Dr. Marnie's applied a fresh wrap and handed him a recovery schedule. No heavy lifting. Keep it clean. Come in for a checkup in 3 days. Wilken nodded. After she left, the room was quiet. Fennel finally spoke. You did not exaggerate. You truly regarded this as insignificant. Wilken leaned back. It's not that I thought it didn't matter. I just didn't want to make a fuss. Alrox sat beside him. Your kind appears to survive by treating pain as an inconvenience. Not always, but we try to keep going. Sometimes that's all you can do. Fennel tilted his head. And if you could not, then I'd ask for help. Like I did tonight. Alrox looked at the bandage again. We must adjust our understanding of your species thresholds. Wilken smiled faintly. You're not the first to say that. A week later, Wilken returned to the lab, arm still sore, bandage clean but tight. The students gathered around him as he started the day's lesson. All right, he said. Today we're going to talk about pain management and triage prioritization. Fennel raised his hand. Will you be injuring yourself again for demonstration? Wilken sighed. No, not this time. The lesson proceeded. The students asked sharper questions now. They wanted to understand not just the procedures but the mindset behind them. Why humans fought through injury. Why they patched themselves up and kept going. At the end of the session, Wilken sat on the edge of the table, massaging his arm. Fennel approached. We are no longer confused by your behavior. But we remain wary of it. Fair, Wilken said. I probably should have gone to the med center earlier. You should have, Fennel agreed. But you did not. And you are still here. Wilken nodded. That's the human condition, I guess. We bleed, we bandage, we keep moving. Alrox considered that. And sometimes you allow others to help. Yeah, Wilken said. Sometimes we do. And for the first time since arriving on the outpost, he felt like maybe the students weren't just studying humanity. Maybe they were starting to understand it. Wilken blinked awake to the sound of metal tapping against his window. It was subtle, like rain if rain had intention. He waited, hoping it was nothing. It wasn't. The tapping came again, 3 sharp clicks, a pause, then 2 more. He groaned and swung his legs over the side of the bed. His arm twinged as he pulled on a shirt. He crossed the room, thumbed the window control, and came face to face with a pair of translucent eyes pressed against the glass. Kez, he muttered. Why are you upside down on my window? I am not upside down, Kez corrected through the comm port. Your habitat is poorly oriented. Are you clinging to the wall again? Yes. I am here for an urgent clarification. It's not even first shift yet. I do not observe your sleep cycles. Wilken sighed, opened the hatch, and stepped aside as Kez slid in sideways like a three-legged lizard with ideas about gravity. Wilken rubbed his forehead. What's so urgent? Kez's frons twitched. Is it true that humans engage in voluntary combat with no territorial stakes? Wilken stared. What? Fennel distributed a document. It describes an event called boxing. Two humans strike each other repeatedly while a crowd encourages them. That's not inaccurate. Why? Wilken sat down slowly. Okay. First, that's not a medical emergency. Second, it's a sport. Third, we're not going to recreate it. Kez tilted his head. But it causes tissue damage. Yeah, that's part of the problem. It's regulated. Professionals train for years to do it safely. There is no safe way to rupture blood vessels in one's orbital cavity. Welcome to the human condition. Kez looked unconvinced. Are there many such rituals? Wilken leaned back. Too many. There's one where people jump off cliffs with elastic cords tied to their ankles. That's supposed to be fun. Kez opened and closed his mouth twice. You are not a survivable species. Wilken scratched the back of his neck. Tell that to the last asteroid that tried to kill us. Kez took a long breath through his spiracles and shifted his limbs into a seated coil. You require more observation. May I remain? Wilken gestured vaguely. Suit yourself. I'm making coffee. Kez followed, leaving a faint trail of suction prints on the ceiling. Later that day, the lab was quieter than usual. Most of the students were reviewing footage from the prior session, but Kez had refused to leave Wilken's side since breakfast. When Wilken tried to enter the supply room, Kez followed. When he went to the sanitation unit, Kez waited outside. When he coughed once, Kez pinged the medical system. By midday, Wilken had had enough. All right, he said, turning around in the corridor. What's going on? You're not just curious. You're watching me like I'm going to drop dead at any moment. Kez hesitated. You dismiss injury with alarming speed. It is difficult to distinguish between your pain tolerance and your recklessness. Wilken folded his arms. You're worried I'm going to hurt myself again. You did not correctly assess your own condition. I didn't need stitches for attention, Kez. That is precisely the concern. You required assistance and delayed seeking it. That is an error in judgment. Wilken blinked. You're mad because I didn't act like I was in danger? I am not mad. I am concerned. And I am attempting to recalibrate my understanding of your species' self-preservation metrics. Wilken rubbed the bridge of his nose. All right, fair. But hovering around me like I'm made of glass isn't gonna help. I'm fine. That word is insufficiently specific. I'm within normal operating parameters. Better? Kez twitched. Marginally. Wilken started walking again. Come on. I've got to restock the emergency kits. You can help. Kez followed, still upside down. They reached the storage bay, where crates of supplies lined the walls: compressed dressings, thermal blankets, adhesive splints. Wilken opened one and began sorting. Kez hovered above, eyeing the contents. What is this? Kez asked, holding up a plastic packet. Burn gel. You anticipate burns? Yeah. Sometimes systems overheat, or people touch things they shouldn't, or try to cook. You allow untrained personnel to handle heat sources? We allow everyone to eat. Kez frowned. Your species lives on the edge of constant harm. Wilken laughed. We live on the edge of breakfast, mostly. Danger's just a side effect. As they worked, Fennel entered, his gait unusually stiff. He approached Wilken with a folded datasheet. I need your opinion, he said. We are analyzing cultural frameworks for risk. This is a transcript of a human recreational activity called paintball. Wilken groaned. Oh no. It involves simulated warfare, Fennel continued. In forest environments. With projectile weapons. They're non-lethal, Wilken said. You willingly simulate lethal conflict? For fun. Fennel stared. Why? Because it's exhilarating. It teaches tactics. Teamwork. You could simulate that without impact trauma. Yeah, but then it wouldn't be interesting. Fennel turned to Kez. Do you understand this? Kez's fronds drooped. Barely. Wilken sat on a crate. Look, I get it. From your perspective, we look like we're constantly inventing new ways to get hurt. You or Fennel said flatly. But that's because we're wired to test limits. We're curious. We want to feel alive. That sometimes means pushing past comfort or safety. It's not stupidity. It's a willingness to risk things. Fennel considered that. And if the risk becomes fatal, then we learn. Hopefully. Kez floated down to eye level. So harm is acceptable if it leads to progress? In moderation, Wilken said. We know it's not ideal, but it's part of how we've survived. Trial error. Pain adaptation. Fennel was quiet for a moment. We have always removed variables before trial. We do not permit pain in our research. Different cultures. Different paths. Kez looked at the burn gel again. Your entire medical system is built as a counterweight to your behavior. Pretty much. Fennel folded the datasheet. You are a contradiction. Wilken smiled. That's the nicest thing anyone said to me today. Later, as the students filed out to their rest cycles, Wilken sat alone at the console, reviewing inventory reports. His bandaged arm itched. He didn't scratch it. Kez lingered near the door. May I ask one more question? Wilken nodded. Do you fear your own limits? Wilken looked up. Sometimes. But I think we fear not knowing them even more. Kez nodded once and left. Wilken sat in the quiet, the hum of the facility filling the space where conversation had been. He checked the bandage again clean. Healing. He flexed his fingers, testing the range. The skin pulled slightly but held. Outside, the station lights dimmed for the artificial night cycle. Somewhere above, Saturn turned slowly, indifferent to the strange creatures orbiting it. And on a quiet outpost where nothing should have surprised anyone anymore, Wilken Norrell continued to teach a room full of aliens what it meant to be human, one bandage, one baffling truth, and one impossible habit at a time. The training room was set to a comfortable 19 degrees centigrade with filtered humidity, but Wilken was sweating anyway. Not from heat, but because he was trying to coax a stubborn emergency simulator to recognize a basic splinting sequence. The thing kept flashing red and insisting limb alignment incorrect, even though the dummy's fake femur was about as aligned as anything that wasn't breathing could be. Across the room, the students observed in silence. Today's session was live practice only, no lectures, no holos. Just hands-on work with human trauma responses. Fennel, Kez, Alrox, and two others, Brennick and Sewell, stood in a semicircle, watching Wilken's every move with a mix of fascination and disbelief. Wilken took a breath and addressed the simulator directly. You're lucky you don't have actual legs, because I'd re-break them out of spite. The machine chirped once, then finally turned green. Splint accepted. There we go, he muttered, stepping back. All right, who's next? Sewell, whose upper limbs folded inwards like a praying mantis, stepped forward. I have reviewed the footage. I will attempt to replicate the process. Wilken handed her the splinting materials and gestured toward the second dummy. No pressure. Just pretend it's someone you care about. I do not care about anyone yet, she replied. Well, pretend anyway. Sewell worked with careful movements, adjusting the limb with slow, deliberate angles. She paused halfway through. Is it common for your rescuers to perform this under duress? You mean stress? Wilken asked. Yes. In high noise, low visibility, time-constrained conditions. All the time. Sometimes in the middle of a fire. Once, I did it while someone's dog was trying to bite my ankle. Why would you not remove the animal? I was kind of busy saving its owner. Sewell tilted her head. Your capacity for task prioritization is unsettling. Wilken shrugged. We call it triage. She finished the splint. The simulator gave a green light. She stepped back, eyes narrowing slightly. It is harder than it appears. Kez drifted closer. You make it look instinctive. That's just practice. We drill it over and over until our hands move faster than our thoughts. Alrox opened a compartment and pulled out a roll of elastic bandage. And if the patient is panicking? Then you talk. You calm them down. Or distract them. Or lie. Fennel's eye twitched. You condone deception? If it keeps someone alive? Absolutely. I once told a guy his leg was definitely still attached. It wasn't, but he stayed still long enough for us to get him to surgery. Alrox looked at the bandage in his hand. This tool is insufficient to repair a severed limb. No, but it helps keep blood inside. That buys time. And time saves lives. Kez uncoiled one of his limbs and mimed wrapping it around the dummy's arm. The adhesive strips are clumsy. They're designed for speed, not elegance. He paused, then tried again, this time pressing the bandage tighter. The simulator gave a yellow light. Pressure suboptimal, it said. Kez exhaled through his spiracles. Your tools demand a brutal efficiency. Welcome to human medicine, Wilken said. It's not about perfection. It's about doing the best thing quickly. Hours passed. The students took turns running mock emergencies, burns, fractures, lacerations, even a fake collapsed lung scenario using a modified balloon and a pressure sensor. Wilken moved between stations, correcting grips, adjusting angles, occasionally stepping in when someone tried to put a bandage over a sensor port instead of a wound. By the end of the 4th hour, the room smelled faintly of synthetic skin and sterilized plastic. The dummies were scattered across the floor like a battlefield of half-treated mannequins. Wilken collapsed into a chair, rubbing his temples. You're all improving, he said. Painfully slowly, but improving. Fennel approached with a datapad. We have questions. Not about technique. About context. Wilken gestured lazily. Go on. Why does your species place so much emphasis on individual survival in high-risk environments? Because every person matters. Fennel hesitated. That is not universally true among other species. Some prioritize collective preservation. Others optimize for genetic continuity. We prioritize the person in front of us, even if it's a stranger. Brennick, silent until now, finally spoke. But you also accept loss with familiarity. We've had practice. Kez hovered a little closer. Is it not contradictory to fight so hard for one life while accepting that others must be let go? Wilken's eyes drifted to the floor. It's not about logic. It's about trying. If you stop trying, even when you know you'll lose someone, then what's the point? The room was quiet for a moment. Not out of reverence, but because they were processing. Alrox finally broke the silence. Your resilience is not just physical. It is philosophical. Wilken half laughed. That's one way to put it. Sewell looked at her own hands, still stained faintly with the colored gel the simulator used to mimic blood. We are trained to avoid emotional investment in the subjects of care. You seem to encourage it. We're human. We care even when it hurts. Fennel turned the datapad off. This training has altered my perception. Of me. Of your species. We assumed your survival was accidental. That you endured by brute resistance. But it is layered. You endure because you choose to. Wilken stood and stretched his back with a wince. We choose something every time we get hurt and keep going. Even if the injury is self-inflicted? Asked Kez. Especially then. The lights dimmed slightly, signaling the end of the current cycle. The students gathered their notes and tools. Wilken started stacking the used dressings into a disposal bin. Before leaving, Kez looked back. You never updated us on your injury. Wilken lifted his arm and rotated it slowly. Healing well. No infection. Will it leave a mark? Probably. Kez seemed to consider that. Does it bother you? Wilken shook his head. Scars are just proof that something tried to stop you and failed. Kez made a whirring noise that might have been approval or confusion. We will return next cycle. One by one they left. Wilken remained behind, tidying the room. He tossed the last of the simulation bandages into the bin and turned off the dummy units. The silence that followed was oddly comforting. He glanced at the wall panel. His shift was over, but he wasn't tired anymore. Instead, he felt something else, something he hadn't quite named until now. Pride. Not in himself, but in them. The aliens. They weren't just learning procedures. They were trying to understand humanity in all its messy, irrational depth. And against all odds, they were starting to get it. He sealed the door behind him, checked his arm one last time, and headed down the corridor, humming faintly under his breath. There were no alarms, no emergencies, no wounds left unattended. For once, that was enough.